Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark Channel. I'm so excited to have you here today. If you're looking to improve your English listening and speaking skills, build your confidence, and speak more fluently than ever, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to dive into a special story series. A journey about finding a home, making new friends, and learning to face challenges in a new city. Through this story, you'll not only enjoy an engaging narrative, but also practice real English in everyday situations. So get ready to boost your English, follow Liam's adventure, and light up your English journey with us. Let's get started. Chapter 1. The Departure. I still remember the day I left my hometown, Murrayfield. It was a small place, quiet and slow-paced. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone else. But I was ready for a change. I had just been accepted to study at the University of Melbourne, and I couldn't wait to start this new chapter of my life. Packing wasn't easy. I sat on my bed, folding the last few shirts and stuffing them into my worn-out backpack. I kept looking over at Max, my dog, who was lying quietly by the window, watching me with those big, loyal eyes. I loved him so much, and the thought of leaving him behind made my chest tighten. How was I supposed to live without him by my side? My mom was bustling around the kitchen, making sure everything was ready for my trip. Just as I zipped up my backpack, the phone rang. Mom picked it up, and after a moment she called out, "Liam, it's Aunt Clara on the phone." I felt a flutter of nerves. Aunt Clara lived in Melbourne and had offered me a room before, but I wasn't sure I wanted to stay with her. I wanted my independence, or at least that's what I told myself. I took the phone from Mom and said, "Hi, Aunt Clara." Her voice was warm but a little excited. "Liam, darling, your mother told me you're coming to Melbourne. You can stay with me, you know. I have a spare room and it's close to the university. It would be lovely to have you here." I hesitated. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I smiled politely and said, "Thanks so much, Aunt Clara, but I'm actually planning to stay with a friend when I arrive." It wasn't true, but I wanted to make my own way. "Maybe I can call you next week?" "Of course, Liam. I'm really looking forward to seeing you," she said, her voice bright, with hope. After I hung up, I felt a mix of excitement and doubt. I wanted to experience the city on my own terms, meet new people, maybe find some fun, but a part of me wondered if I was making the right choice. Mom came into my room with a sad smile. "I'm going to miss you so much," she said, giving me a hug. I hugged her back tightly, trying not to let my own feelings show. My older brother, Matt, was there too, wishing me luck. Max gave a small bark, as if saying goodbye too. I knelt down and scratched behind his ears one last time. "Be good, boy," I whispered. The next morning, I woke up early and caught the train to Melbourne. Watching the familiar countryside roll by, I felt a strange mix of excitement and loneliness. This was really happening. I was leaving behind everything I'd known. When I arrived, Melbourne was vast and bustling. The streets were crowded, and the noise was a sharp contrast to the peaceful silence of Murrayfield. I took a taxi towards St. Kilda Beach, where I hoped to find a place to stay. The beach was beautiful. Waves crashing, the salty breeze, and people laughing and enjoying the sun. It felt like the perfect place to start fresh. That night, I stayed at a backpackers' hostel near the water. I was nervous but hopeful. The next morning, I grabbed a local paper and began searching for a share house. Flats near the beach were expensive, so I looked for rooms in shared houses. Then I found it. An ad for a room in a house shared by two guys near the beach. It was affordable, and the description sounded promising. Without hesitation, I called the number. "Hello?" A friendly voice answered. "Hi, I'm Liam. I saw your ad for the share house. Is the room still available?" "Yeah, mate, it is." "I'm Jake," he said. "You'd be moving in with me and Tom at 45 Seabrook Road. Want to come check it out?" Agreed to meet them that afternoon. When I arrived, the place looked nice. Big TV in the living room, relaxed vibe. Jake and Tom seemed like good guys. They talked about surfing, music, and going out. It felt like I'd found the right place. That night, we went to a local pub with some of their friends. I drank too much beer and had a great time. But there was a moment I didn't understand. Jake spoke quietly to a man I hadn't met before, a man named Rodney. They talked about some work later that night. I asked, but Jake just said, "Nothing to worry about, mate." The next morning, I was still in bed when there was a loud knocking on the door. Two police officers called out, asking for Jake and Tom. My heart raced. They came in with a search warrant and started looking through the rooms. I watched as they pulled out bags filled with stolen items, watches, phones, cash. I looked at Jake and Tom in shock. Jake sighed and said, "Liam just moved in yesterday. He doesn't know anything." That was the end of my time at Seabrook Road. Without the money to stay on my own, I had to leave. As I packed my bag once again, I realized this city was going to be more complicated than I thought. But despite everything, I was ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 2. The First Flat Share. Leaving Jake and Tom behind was harder than I thought. The shock of the police raid and their arrest still lingered in my mind as I packed my few belongings and checked out of the house. I found myself once again at the backpackers' hostel, feeling lost and uncertain about what to do next. The city that had seemed so full of promise now felt cold and overwhelming. The morning sun streamed through the small window of my room as I sat quietly, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee. I knew I couldn't stay at the hostel much longer. It wasn't just the noise or the cramped space. It was the feeling that I was stuck, like I wasn't moving forward. Determined to turn things around, I headed to the University of Melbourne's campus. The university was bustling with life. Students hurried between buildings, laughing and chatting, their faces bright with hope and excitement. I felt a little comfort in the crowd, even though I still felt out of place. As I made my way to the university cafe, I spotted a familiar face, David, a fellow student from Italy who I had met briefly during orientation. Friendly and approachable, David greeted me with a warm smile. "Hey, Liam," he said. "You look like you could use a friend." I smiled back. "Yeah, it's been a rough start. I'm still trying to find a place to live." David nodded knowingly. "Finding housing here isn't easy, but you're not alone. Let me show you something." He led me to the notice board in the university's common area, where dozens of flyers and ads were pinned. Most were small handwritten notes, while others were printed posters advertising rooms, flat shares, or sublets. We scanned through the postings carefully. Some places were way out of my budget, while others were already taken. After a few minutes, a handwritten ad caught my eye. Quiet house with garden. Looking for one student to share with. Call Bruce. The ad was simple but inviting. I quickly pulled out my phone and dialed the number. "Hello, this is Liam," I said when a man answered. "I'm interested in the room you advertised. Is it still available?" "Yes," the man replied shortly. "I'm Bruce. Would you like to come by tonight?" I agreed and thanked him. Later that day, David wished me luck and went to his classes while I prepared to meet Bruce. The address led me to an old Victorian-style house in a quiet neighborhood near the city center. The garden was overgrown but charming, with vines climbing up the brick walls and wildflowers blooming near the porch. I rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Bruce opened the door. He was tall and lean, with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. He had an intense presence, the kind that made you feel both curious and uneasy. "Liam," I introduced myself. "Bruce," he said, stepping aside to let me in. The inside of the house was unlike any place I had seen so far. The walls were covered with paintings and art prints. The air smelled faintly of oil paint and turpentine, and everywhere I looked, there were brushes, sketchbooks, and canvases stacked in corners. Bruce didn't offer much small talk. Instead, he studied me carefully before speaking. "So, you want the room?" he said. "Tell me, do you appreciate art?" I hesitated. "I'm eager to learn. I want to focus on my studies, and I thought living here might be a good environment." Bruce raised an eyebrow as if doubting me. "Do you even know who Picasso is?" he asked bluntly. "I've heard of him, but I'm not very familiar with his work," I admitted. His expression darkened. "I'm a lecturer in art history," he said. "I expect my housemates to have some interest in the arts. You'll need to appreciate that if you want to live here." Feeling awkward, I tried to shift the conversation. "What do you do when you're not teaching?" Bruce glanced at his watch. "I have guests coming over soon. I'll let you know if the room is still available." Before I could say more, he excused himself, leaving me standing in the hallway, unsure if I had made a good impression. I stepped outside, the cool evening air filling my lungs. The house was beautiful, but the atmosphere felt cold and unwelcoming. That night, back at the hostel, I lay awake thinking about the visit. Bruce was clearly passionate about his work, but his sharp words and distant manner made me feel like an outsider. I realized I needed more than just a roof over my head. I needed a place where I felt accepted. The next day, I met up with David again. He suggested I try looking in neighborhoods a little farther from campus, where rents were cheaper and people might be more laid back. I spent the afternoon scanning more ads, hoping to find the right fit. Finding a home wasn't just about money or location. It was about feeling safe, comfortable, and like I belonged. As the sun set over Melbourne, I looked out my hostel window and promised myself I wouldn't give up. My place was out there somewhere. I just had to keep searching. Chapter 3. The Artist's Place. After the unsettling experience with Jake and Tom and the brief, uncomfortable visit to Bruce's, I was starting to feel the weight of uncertainty. Each day felt like a test of patience and resolve. I was determined to find a place that wasn't just a roof over my head, somewhere I could call home, a place where I could focus on my studies and feel at peace. One afternoon, after classes, I met David again. He had been a steady friend since the beginning of my Melbourne adventure, always offering advice and encouragement. We sat together at the university cafe, sharing a coffee and talking about the endless search for accommodation. "You know," David said, "there's an art student named Mia who's looking for a flatmate. She's pretty chill and loves animals. Maybe that could be a good fit?" I wasn't sure. After Bruce, I wasn't eager to live with another art person, but David's suggestion was worth a try. The next day, I found Mia's ad on the university notice board. "Looking for a flatmate, quiet house, near the city, close to transport, no parties, must love animals." I called Mia's number right away. "Hi, Mia. This is Liam. I'm interested in your flatmate ad." "Hi, Liam. That's great. When can you come by to see the place?" I arranged to visit that evening. Mia's house was a warm and cozy place nestled in a leafy suburb. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the difference. It wasn't cluttered or tense like Bruce's. Instead, the walls were decorated with paintings and drawings, but everything felt inviting and lived in. Mia greeted me with a bright smile. She had a calm presence, the kind of person you could talk to for hours. "This is my dog, Poppy," she said, leading me to a small, fluffy terrier wagging its tail. I smiled. "She's adorable." Mia showed me around the house. The kitchen was spacious and smelled of fresh herbs. The living room had big windows that let in the afternoon sun. My room was simple but comfortable, with a desk by the window perfect for studying. Over the next few days, I started settling in. Mia was easygoing and respectful. We shared meals and chatted about our courses, our hometowns, and our dreams for the future. Living there felt like a fresh start. But then, something unexpected happened. One morning, I woke up to find a small creature crawling across my bedroom floor. I froze. It was a lizard. I wasn't afraid of dogs or cats, but reptiles? That was a different story. "Don't worry," Mia said when I told her. "That's just Lizzie, our blue-tongued lizard. She's harmless." I tried to stay calm, but over the next week, I kept spotting Lizzie in different parts of the house, near my bed, in the hallway, even on the kitchen table once. No matter how much Mia reassured me, my discomfort grew. One night I lay awake, heart pounding as I imagined Lizzie crawling across my sheets. The fear was real and overpowering. Eventually, I knew I had to be honest with myself. I couldn't stay there. The next morning, I packed my things quietly. I explained to Mia that while I appreciated her kindness and the warmth of the home, I wasn't ready to live with lizards. She smiled understandingly. "I get it. Not everyone's a reptile fan." Walking out the door, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I was one step closer to finding my place, but still far from home. That night, back at the hostel, I stared out at the city lights, wondering how many more doors I'd have to knock on before I found the one that would finally open for me. Chapter 4: The Animal Lover's Home. After leaving Mia's place, I found myself back at the backpackers' hostel once again. The feeling of uncertainty lingered like a cloud over me. Melbourne was a vast city, full of people and opportunities, yet I felt increasingly alone. Finding the right place to live was turning out to be more complicated than I had imagined. It wasn't just about affordability or location. It was about finding a space where I could feel safe and comfortable. A real home. The next morning, determined not to lose hope, I made my way once again to the university notice boards and checked the online housing listings. I spent hours scrolling, calling, and visiting places that seemed promising at first glance, but somehow never quite felt right. Some were too expensive, others too noisy or unfriendly. The rejection was wearing me down, but I reminded myself that every no brought me one step closer to the right yes. One afternoon, as I was sitting at a cafe near campus nursing a coffee and going through new ads, one particular listing caught my eye. It read, "Quiet house near the zoo, looking for a housemate who loves animals. Large garden, friendly dog. Call Kara." The mention of animals immediately struck a chord with me. I missed Max, my dog back home, more than I had expected. The idea of living somewhere peaceful with a garden and a friendly dog sounded like a dream. Without hesitation, I called the number and arranged to meet Kara later that day. The house was tucked away in a quiet, leafy suburb. As I walked up the path, I was greeted by a joyful golden retriever bounding towards me with a wagging tail and happy eyes. Kara opened the door with a warm smile and introduced herself. "This is Toby," she said, ruffling the dog's ears. "He loves making new friends." The house itself was inviting, filled with warmth and life. Plants adorned the windowsills, colorful cushions decorated the furniture, and the walls were covered with photos of animals and nature scenes. It felt like a home, not just a house. Kara told me about her work at the Melbourne Zoo. Her passion for the animals she cared for was obvious in her voice. She shared amusing stories about the playful antics of the penguins, the elegance of the giraffes, and the stubbornness of the kangaroos. Toby followed me everywhere, resting his head on my lap as if welcoming me as part of the family. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope that I might finally have found a place to settle. But then, something unexpected happened. 1. Morning, while having breakfast at the kitchen table, I felt a strange sensation on my leg. Looking down, I was startled to see a large, scaly, blue-tongued lizard calmly resting against my shin. My heart skipped a beat, and I nearly knocked my cereal bowl over. "Oh, that's Bess," Kara said gently, coming into the room. "She's our pet blue-tongued lizard. She's completely harmless and really just wants to be your friend." I tried to calm myself and assured Kara it was fine. But over the next few days, Bess and a few other lizards seemed to be everywhere, perched on the windowsill, crawling slowly across the floor, even near my bed. Every time I saw one, a wave of panic washed over me. Despite Kara's kind reassurances and gentle words, I found myself growing more and more uneasy. The fear I had of reptiles was deep-rooted, and no amount of explanation could ease it. One evening, after a long day at university, I came home to find Bess lounging right on my doorstep. I stood frozen, unsure how to get past her without causing a scene. It was then I realized something important. No matter how much I liked Kara and Toby, no matter how peaceful the house was, living with lizards was more than I could handle. The rye. Next morning, I packed my things quietly, careful not to disturb the house. I explained to Kara that while I appreciated her kindness and the warmth of the home, I wasn't ready to live with reptiles. She smiled kindly, understanding in her eyes. "I get it," she said softly. "Not everyone's a fan of lizards. I hope you find a place that feels right for you." Walking out of that house felt bittersweet. I had found friendship and kindness there, but I had to honor my feelings and limits. Back at the hostel once more, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The search was harder than I thought, but I refused to give up. The city was still full of possibilities. My home was out there somewhere. I just had to keep looking. Chapter 5. The Noisy Household. After leaving Kara's house, I was feeling a mixture of relief and uncertainty. I'd come close to feeling at home, but my fear of lizards had pushed me away. The city was still full of possibilities, but my hope was starting to wane. Where could I find a place that felt right? Somewhere I could actually settle in? One morning at the university cafe, I bumped into two girls, Ella and Kate, who were classmates. They were lively and friendly, and after a bit of chatting, they invited me to visit their flat. "It's not perfect," Kate warned with a grin, "but it's affordable and close to campus," Ella added. "And we keep it pretty quiet during the week because we all have classes." The thought of peace was appealing. I agreed to come over that afternoon. Their flat was located on Hawthorne Street, a lively but noisy suburb. The building was old, with creaky floors and narrow hallways. When we stepped inside, I immediately noticed the clutter. Shoes were scattered. By the entrance, dirty dishes piled up in the sink, and empty takeaway containers sat on the kitchen table. The place smelled faintly of stale beer and cigarette smoke. I tried not to let it discourage me. The rent was affordable, and the location was convenient. The room they offered me was small, but had a window that let in natural light, a rare find. The first few days were manageable. Ella and Kate kept to their routines, and their friend David, who also lived there, was friendly and easygoing. I started to feel a little hope that maybe, just maybe, this could work out. But soon, the peaceful atmosphere I had been promised evaporated. The first sign was the noise. Late into the night, music would blast from one of the rooms. Doors slammed. shut and loud laughter echoed down the hall. Sometimes I could hear people arguing or shouting in the street outside. Earplugs helped a little, but not enough to drown out the chaos. Then there was the cigarette smoke. Even though the girls told me they smoked outside, the smell crept inside like an unwelcome guest. It clung to the curtains, settled in the fabric of the couch, and made the air heavy and unpleasant. I hated the smell. It reminded me of how far I was from the fresh air and open spaces of home. One evening, after a long day of lectures and study, I returned to find the kitchen a disaster. Several rubbish bags had been left piled next to the door, and a sour stench filled the air. I wrinkled my nose and opened all the windows, trying to clear the smell. The next morning, I gathered my courage and spoke to Ella and Kate. I think we really need to start taking out the rubbish more often, I said gently. And maybe we could agree on smoking only outside to keep the flat fresh. They exchanged glances, a little embarrassed. We'll do better, Kate promised. Sorry, Liam, but promises were hard to keep. Within a few days, the rubbish bags were back, piled up and overflowing. The smell returned, stronger this time, and the cigarette smoke seeped through the rooms again, making me cough. The noise didn't stop either. On weeknights, I often found it hard to sleep. On weekends, it was even worse, with parties, loud music, and people coming and going at all hours. The tipping point came one morning when I opened the kitchen door to find the rubbish bags swarming with maggots. I stared in horror. The filth and neglect were unbearable. I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. That night, while the house was filled with loud laughter and smoke, I packed my belongings quietly. I didn't want to make a scene or say goodbye. I just needed to get out. Back at the hostel, I felt exhausted and frustrated. I was relieved to be away from the chaos, but I was also deeply weary. Every time I thought I had found a place to call home, something pulled me back to square one. Finding a home in this city was turning out to be the hardest challenge of all. But I reminded myself that I had come too far to give up now. Somewhere, out there, my place was waiting, and I was going to find it. Chapter 6. The Clean Freak's Place. After the chaos and noise of the last flat, I was desperate for a fresh start. Somewhere clean, somewhere quiet, somewhere I could focus on my studies and, maybe, finally feel at home. One afternoon, while walking through the local supermarket, I spotted an ad on the community board. It was simple and neat, just like the place I hoped for. Room available in a clean, quiet house. Non-smoker preferred. Call Sean. I decided to call the number straight away. Hello, this is Liam, I said when a calm voice answered. Interested in the room you advertised? Hi, Liam. I'm Shan, she replied kindly. Would you like to come see the place tomorrow afternoon? I agreed immediately. The next day, I found Shan's house in a quiet residential street lined with neat gardens and trimmed hedges. The house looked spotless from the outside, with freshly painted walls and clean windows. When Shan opened the door, I was greeted by a young woman with a warm smile and an air of calm organization. She welcomed me in, and the smell of fresh lemon, cleaner, filled the air. The house was exactly what I needed: bright, tidy, and peaceful. Every surface sparkled, and not a speck of dust was in sight. There were no messy piles or clutter anywhere. It was clear that Sean took pride in keeping her home immaculate. She showed me to my room, simple but comfortable, with a big window that let in plenty of natural light and a small desk facing the garden. The bed was made neatly with fresh linens. Do you mind cleaning up regularly? Shan asked. I like to keep the house spotless, and I expect everyone to help. I nodded. After the chaos of the previous flat, the thought of living in such an orderly environment was actually quite comforting. I'm a non-smoker, I said, and I'm happy to help keep things clean. Sean smiled. Good. I'm glad to hear that. It can be hard living with messy people, so I try to set clear rules. She handed me a small sheet of paper listing the house rules. No smoking indoors. Take out rubbish nightly. Keep common areas tidy. No loud music after 9 p.m. And no guests without prior notice. It felt strict, but fair. That night, I moved in with a mix of relief and nervousness. The quietness of the house was a welcome change from the noisy chaos I had experienced before. Over the next few days, Sean and I settled into a routine. We would study during the day, clean the house together in the evenings, and share quiet dinners. She was kind, but firm, always reminding me gently to keep my things in order and respect the rules. At first, it felt like living with a strict teacher. Sean was meticulous, even cleaning the TV screen multiple times a day and rearranging cushions when they were slightly off-center. I admired her dedication, but sometimes I found it a bit overwhelming. One afternoon, I came home after a long day of lectures, feeling tired and hungry. Sean was vacuuming the living room floor, humming softly to herself. I smiled and sat down to watch some TV, only to be gently told to pause it while she finished cleaning around the room. Her energy for cleaning was impressive and exhausting to keep up with. Still, I felt comfortable here. There was no smoke, no mess, no shouting, just a calm, organized space where I could breathe. A few weeks into living together, my older brother, Matt, called to say he was coming to visit Melbourne. I was excited to have him stay with me and was eager to show him the city. When Matt arrived, Shan welcomed him warmly, though I could tell she was a little uneasy with having a guest in the house. That evening, Matt and I planned a barbecue at a local park. Sean didn't seem interested in joining, which was fine by me. When we returned later that night, Sean was waiting at the door, looking serious. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. She handed me a note she had prepared, listing more detailed rules. No alcohol in the house, no visitors after 9 p.m., no meat in the fridge, daily room cleaning, and no shoes inside. I was taken aback. "Shan, this feels a bit much," I said. "I want to respect your house, but I'm also a student. I need some freedom." She sighed. "I understand, Liam, but this is how I keep the house comfortable for me. If this doesn't work for you, maybe it's better to find another place." I realized she was serious. The rules were strict, and I felt the weight of them pressing down on me. Could I live like this every day? Could I give up late nights with friends, relax with a drink, or simply wear my shoes in my own home? The thought was daunting. Still, I stayed. For a while, I studied hard, kept the house clean, and followed the rules. But inside, I felt a growing restlessness. Living in a perfectly clean house was peaceful, yes, but it wasn't the life I had imagined. I missed laughter, warmth, and a little chaos. I missed feeling at ease. One evening, as Shan scrubbed the kitchen sink for the third time that day, I looked around and wondered, was this really home? Chapter 7. The Charming Roommate. After weeks of searching and moving from place to place, I was beginning to wonder if I would ever find a real home in Melbourne. Each share house came with its own challenges: noise, mess, strict rules, and I was starting to feel exhausted. But then, one afternoon, something changed. I was sitting in the university cafe, scrolling through the housing ads on my phone, when I saw a new listing that caught my eye. It was simple but different. Non-smoker, young university student. Looking for a friendly flatmate. Quiet house, close to campus. Call Sonia. There was a photo attached, and she looked warm and approachable, with a kind smile that seemed to invite conversation. Something about the ad made me hopeful. I called the number right away. "Hi, this is Liam," I said nervously. "Hi, Liam. I'm Sonia," the voice replied cheerfully. "I'd love to meet you. When can you come by?" We arranged to meet that afternoon. When I arrived at Sonia's house, I was immediately struck by how cozy and welcoming it felt. The small garden was filled with colorful flowers, and the front porch had a comfortable chair and a small table with a book resting on it. Sonia greeted me at the door with a genuine smile and a friendly hug. "Welcome," she said. "I hope you'll like it here." She showed me around the house, a modest, clean place with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. My room was small but neat, with a large window that let in warm afternoon sunlight. As we sat down for a cup of tea, we started talking about our studies, our hometowns, and our plans for the future. Sonia was studying literature, and she had a passion for writing poetry. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself opening up more than I had in a long time. Over the next few days, we settled into an easy routine. We shared meals, studied together, and talked late into the evenings about everything from books to music to dreams we hadn't yet dared to chase. For the first time since arriving in Melbourne, I felt like I was truly beginning to belong somewhere. But then, one evening, Sonia told me something that caught me off guard. "My boyfriend's coming to stay for a while," she said quietly. I tried to hide my surprise. I had liked Sonia, more than just a friend, I realized, but I hadn't expected this. The next day, when her boyfriend Greg arrived, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Greg was tall and confident, with a calm demeanor that made him seem at ease in any situation. Sonia seemed happy to have him there, but I felt like an outsider in my own home. The three of us tried to get along, but it wasn't easy. Greg and I had little in common, and Sonia's attention was often focused on him. I found myself retreating to my room more and more, studying late into the night to avoid awkward moments. During the university holidays, I decided to return home to Murrayfield for a break. Spending time with my family and Max, my dog, was comforting, and it gave me a chance to clear my head. But even while I was home, I thought about Sonia constantly. I wondered if things would ever be the same when I returned. When I finally came back to Melbourne, I was nervous. Would Greg still be there? Would Sonia want me around? To my surprise, the house was quiet when I arrived. Greg's things were gone. Sonia greeted me warmly, and for a moment, I felt hope again. We spent that evening cooking dinner together and talking like old friends. But there was a new distance between us. Unspoken feelings and unsaid words hanging in the air. One night, as I lay in my bed, I hesitated. Should I ask Sonia if she wanted me to come to her room? Did she want more from our friendship? But then I reminded myself, she had a boyfriend, and I didn't want to complicate things. I closed my door quietly, trying to push my feelings aside. Living with Sonia was the best home I had found so far. But it wasn't perfect. Life rarely is. And sometimes the hardest part of belonging is knowing when to let go. Chapter 8. Returning to Aunt Clara's. After the ups and downs of living with Sonia and her boyfriend Greg, I realized I needed a break. A place where I could clear my head and regain some peace. The chaos of shared houses and complicated relationships had left me drained. I needed somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. So I called Aunt Clara. "Hi, Aunt Clara, it's Liam," I said, my voice wavering slightly. "Liam, it's so good to hear you," she replied warmly. "Of course you can stay with me for a few days. When are you coming?" I told her I'd be there as soon as possible. When I arrived at Aunt Clara's house, I was greeted by the same old garden, full of flowers and the familiar creak of the porch steps. Clara was waiting at the door with a smile that made me feel instantly welcome. I carried my bags inside and set my things down in the small room she had prepared for me. The house smelled of fresh baking and lavender. It was cozy and filled with little treasures, porcelain dolls on shelves, clocks ticking quietly in every room, and photographs of family and friends adorning the walls. That first evening, we sat together in the living room, drinking cups of tea and talking softly. Clara shared stories of her youth, how she and my mother had been young and wild in their day, full of dreams and adventure. She showed me old photographs of her in bell-bottom pants with flowers embroidered on them, laughing with friends on a sunlit beach. I listened, fascinated to hear a side of her I had never known. The next morning, Clara baked her famous apple cake, filling the house with the sweet scent of cinnamon and baked fruit. We ate together, savoring every bite. It was a kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Days passed slowly and gently. I returned to my studies with renewed focus, and when I wasn't at the university, I helped Clara with small chores around the house. We even had quiet barbecues in the backyard, just the two of us. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Clara turned to me and said, "You know, Liam, life doesn't always give us what we want. Sometimes it gives us what we need." Her words stayed with me long after I went to bed. One afternoon, while I was at the university, Clara called me. "I've got a surprise for you," she said excitedly. "Your brother Matt is coming to visit in 2 weeks. You'll get to see him again." I was thrilled. The thought of spending time with Matt, sharing stories, and laughing like we used to made me smile. When Matt arrived, Clara welcomed him warmly. That evening, the three of us shared a simple dinner talking about life and family. Matt told me about life back home in Murrayfield, and for a moment, I felt connected to my roots again. But Clara's kindness didn't stop there. One evening, as Matt and I prepared for a barbecue in the garden, Clara suddenly looked pale and uneasy. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm not feeling well tonight. She excused herself and went inside. Matt and I continued with the barbecue, but I couldn't shake the worry. Later that night, Clara came back out, looking a little better but still tired. I just wanted to talk, she said. I've lived a long life, but I've made mistakes. I want you to know about them. She told me stories about her past loves, including a man named Sam from South Africa. They had lived together for a time, sharing dreams and hopes, but life had pulled them apart. As she spoke, I saw a side of Clara I hadn't expected. A woman who had loved deeply and lost, but who still carried hope. Days turned into weeks, and our quiet life together continued. I felt stronger, calmer, and more grounded than I had in months. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived for me. I took it from Clara and opened it carefully. Inside was a note from Sonia. She apologized for the pain she had caused and confessed her feelings. She wanted to be with me but didn't know how. I read the letter twice, my emotions swirling. When I showed it to Clara, she smiled gently. Sometimes, she said, love is complicated, but what matters most is that you find peace within yourself. I nodded, feeling a quiet strength growing inside me. Returning to Aunt Clara's house had been exactly what I needed. A place to heal, to reflect, and to prepare for whatever came next. Chapter 9. Finding Peace. Living with Aunt Clara had given me more than just a roof over my head. It gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in a long time. After months of moving from place to place, dealing with noisy housemates and complicated relationships, I finally found a space where I could breathe and focus on myself. Days passed slowly but gently. Mornings were spent at the university, where I immersed myself in my studies. Afternoons were quieter. I helped Clara around the house, running small errands, watering plants, and sometimes just sitting with her as she told stories of the past. Evenings were peaceful. We would often sit in the garden, drinking soda and watching the stars twinkle above the city. The world outside seemed far away. The steady routine helped me heal. I began to feel stronger, more centered. The constant anxiety and restlessness I'd carried since arriving in Melbourne started to fade. One evening, Clara put on some old vinyl records, soft jazz and folk tunes from decades ago. We sat together, listening quietly. For a moment, the music filled the silence between us, comforting and familiar. It was in these small moments that I realized what I had been searching for: peace. Not the kind that comes from excitement or adventure, but the kind that comes from acceptance and stillness. My phone rang one afternoon. It was David, my friend from university. "Hey, mate, big news," he said enthusiastically. "I'm moving to Brisbane. I met someone there. Ma, a student from Japan. We're going to start a life together." I smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's great, David. You deserve it," he chuckled. "Thanks, Liam. You'll find your way too. I just know it." Hearing his words lifted my spirits. Maybe I didn't have everything figured out yet, but I was getting there. Around the same time, Clara suggested I try finding a part-time job. "You're good with people," she said. "Maybe working at a cafe or bookstore will help you meet new friends and earn some money." It made sense. The next day, I dusted off my resume and started handing it out. Within a week, I landed a part-time job at a small bookstore near the university. The owner, Mr. Green, was an elderly man with a warm smile and a love for books. He welcomed me kindly and shared stories about his travels and favorite authors. Working there was a joy. I was surrounded by stories and knowledge, and I loved helping customers find the perfect book. The job gave me a sense of purpose and connected me to a community beyond university walls. My days settled into a comforting rhythm. Classes in the morning, work in the afternoon, quiet evenings with Clara. Sometimes we played old records. Other times we simply watched the cricket on TV. Life wasn't perfect. There were still moments of loneliness and doubt. But I felt grounded. One cool December evening, Clara brought me a slice of her famous apple cake and sat beside me in the garden. "You know, Liam," she said softly, "life is a bit like the sea. Some days it's calm, some days it's wild. But if you learn to swim, you can survive any wave." I laughed and replied, "Then I guess I'm learning to swim." We smiled together, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. I didn't have the perfect housemates or the perfect life, but I had found something better, a place to belong, and that was enough. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. The days at Aunt Clara's house passed quietly but meaningfully. I spent my mornings at university, deeply engaged in my studies, and my afternoons helping Clara around the house or working part-time at the bookstore. Slowly, life found a steady rhythm, one I had longed for but never quite experienced since arriving in Melbourne. I often thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the chaotic share houses, noisy and messy, to the strict and spotless flat that felt more like a prison, to the warm but lizard-filled home, every place had taught me something about myself and what I truly needed. Now, in Clara's calm house, I felt a sense of belonging. It wasn't flashy or exciting, but it was real. And it was enough. One afternoon, as Clara and I sat in the garden sipping cold drinks, she turned to me with a thoughtful smile. You know, Liam, sometimes life doesn't give us what we want, but if we're lucky, it gives us what we need, she said. I nodded slowly. It made sense. The things I had chased, the perfect flat, the ideal housemates, even romance, hadn't always worked out. But what I had found was peace, stability, and kindness. Then, one day, my phone rang. It was David, my friend from university. Hey, Liam, he said cheerfully. I'm moving to Brisbane to be with Ma. It's a big step, but I'm excited. Good luck, David, I replied. You deserve happiness. Thanks, mate. And you're doing well. I can tell. His words lifted my spirits. I was still figuring things out, but for the first time in months, I wasn't scared. Encouraged by Clara's suggestion, I handed out more resumes and soon secured a part-time job at a cozy bookstore not far from campus. The owner, Mr. Green, was an elderly gentleman with a big heart and a love for stories. Working there made me feel connected, useful, and part of something bigger. Evenings were often spent playing old records with Clara or watching cricket matches on TV. Simple pleasures, but they grounded me. Sometimes I thought about Sonia. We had spoken after she sent me that letter, apologizing and expressing her feelings. We had forgiven each other, but the past was behind us now. I realized that life, like the sea Clara spoke of, could be calm or wild. But if I learned to swim, to adapt, to accept, I could survive any wave. One chilly evening in early December, I sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky with pink and gold. Clara brought me a piece of her famous apple cake and smiled. You're learning to swim, Liam, she said softly. I smiled back, feeling a quiet joy in my heart. My new beginning was not marked by grand events or dramatic changes. It was quiet, steady, and filled with small moments of happiness. I wasn't perfect, my life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was more than enough. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.